verse 14, which teaches this lesson. Hang out with people who faithfully serve God with a humble heart. Hang out with people who serve God with a humble heart. So verse 14 says this, the Dung Gate was repaired by Malkijah, son of Rechab, ruler of the district of Beth-Haccherem. He rebuilt it and put its doors and bolts and bars in place. We joked about this last time. Ye old Dung Gate. I bet the rents for the apartments near the Dung Gate were a little cheaper than other places. And it was just that. It was the city sewage system. It's where they hauled out the city sewage. That's why they called it that. Now, if I had my druthers, how about you? Where would you rather? Would you rather work at the Dung Gate or maybe the Valley Gate? I bet the views were a little better there. Or how about the Fountain Gate? I bet they had a jacuzzi nearby to soak in after a hard day laying those bricks. Or how about the gate that was by the Tower of the Ovens, where the aroma of bagels and cinnamon rolls wafted over you all day long? But no, here's faithful Malkijah, son of Rechab, ruler of the district of Beth-Haccherem, working at the Dung Gate. And he's a ruler. He's a man of influence. But he said, you know what? I want to serve where I'm needed, not where I want to, where I'm needed. You want to hang around with people like that, who serve where they're needed regardless of what it looks like. That's humility. One of the truths I learned growing up in life was that until I was willing to accept assignments from God that weren't exactly what you'd call the plum assignments, until I was ready to accept those assignments, guess what? God would not raise me up and give me the bigger thing, the more visible thing, the more important thing. And life has taught me this in so many ways. I spent several years in college and seminary working as a waiter in some fine restaurants. By the end of my waiting career, I was doing tableside cooking, serving Dom Perignon, and making almost $200 a night. My last tip and my last table on my last night before we moved to Minnesota, and when I started as a pastor, was a crisp, clean $100 bill. But you know what? I never would have gotten to those plum assignments if I hadn't a few years earlier accepted a job as a dishwasher in a pancake house. And then a few months later got promoted to busboy. And that's how it worked as I worked my way up. And that first church that I served at was in Minnesota, a little tiny church, 20 people. They hadn't had a pastor in years who'd stayed there more than 2 years. They cycled out just that fast. They didn't want to hang around. The part of Minnesota we lived in, well, Lou Holtz, football coach, when he went to Minnesota for a few years, he said of Minnesota, it's not the end of the world, but you can see it from here. So I told Janice when we got to Dalbo, I said, you know what? We're going to stay here 5 years. We're going to help him break the cycle and snap out of it. We chose to do that. It wasn't financially wise, didn't necessarily advance my career, but I had 5 years with some of the most beautiful people in my life. We built from scratch the best softball team I've ever been on. And literally built a softball field. A farmer donated his bean field, and we turned it into a softball field, and it was beautifully done. Big, huge fence in the back, and it was just gorgeous. We called it the Field of Dreams. And in our third season, that softball team that we put on the field was the best softball team I've ever been a part of my whole life. We became a juggernaut, a giant. These corn-fed men and women, too, as a co-ed softball team. These guys could hit. We went undefeated that last season. We scored 20 runs a game. We took down the mighty Malacca Lakes Covenant Church, which won the trophy every year. We took them down. And this experience, if you've read my book, A Sparrow Can Fall, this is what I'm writing about in that book. My first church is the inspiration behind that story. But the thing is, even though on paper this was not a plum assignment, it was because I stayed there 5 years that a church in New England, which is where we really wanted to go, a much bigger church, took notice of this little country pastor and took a chance with him in his early 30s and brought him out. And that's when I came to Bristol. Jesus said, if you prove yourself faithful in little things, then God will give you bigger things. Is there any assignment that God will give you that is unimportant when it's all said and done? Now it all matters. 1 Corinthians 12 says the parts of our body that seem weaker, they're actually the indispensable parts. If Malkijah had not fixed the Dung Gate, guess what? The lives of the people in Jerusalem would have gone in the crapper. Sorry, that was bad. There is no unimportant job in the church. I can preach a whale of a sermon. The worship team can knock it out of the park, but if we don't have people in the nursery, we don't have greeters, we don't have people making coffee for our fellowship time, we don't have youth groups, then it'll all go to waste.